Hey, everybody, welcome back to IndieQuest, your celebration of the indie and obscure. My name is Josh, and I'm here with my two co-hosts today, Seth, also known as Captain Drachma. How's it going, man?
It's going well. I'm super excited to talk about a game. Some of my favorite episodes we've ever done is talking about games specifically that we all played together. So I'm excited.
Video games. A video game podcast talking about video games. Who knew?
Yeah.
We also have here Steve, also known as Blink. How's it going, man?
It's pretty good, man. I'm also excited. This episode gave me an opportunity to correct a 5-year mistake in terms of not playing this. What I always say that, but it's like, there's so many games in the world. We can't play all of them right when they come out, but this one has been hanging over my head for a long time since I was such a big fan of the first one. And after playing it, I was a little, well, I'm not going to spoil it, but we'll say I had some thoughts for myself around not playing it for as long as I did. I also
You're like, how dare you?
We're being kind of coy about like, ooh, what's the game we're talking about? It's in the title, and we announced it last episode. Like, is there a single person listening right now that doesn't know what they're about to get in for?
We are talking about the 2017 game from Freebird Studios, Freebird Software, something like that. But it's a sequel to the Moon, which we all absolutely adored. And well, I think we were all pretty much on the same page that we at least baseline liked this game, right? I had a good time, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I still don't know if we've even said the title. I'm not sure.
Finding Paradise. Did I not say the name? It's called Finding Paradise.
I think you just said sequel. And so we were just being coy with them all day. Just coy boys all day long.
Really? Here, I'll tell you what. How about I make it easier for the folks, since now they think they know the name. They think they know the developer. I'll give you guys a little description of this game.
Okay, there you go.
All right. Finding Paradise is an indie adventure RPG about two doctors traversing through the memories of a dying man to fulfill his last wish. It's the second full episode of the To the Moon series. Now, I have a little more of a description of this game in particular that I'll read in a sec, but I just want to pause. It's interesting that they call it an RPG. I guess we'll get into it, but okay, maybe in this one, technically you could say that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's an RPG strictly in the sense that it is made in Game Maker and that it looks like a Super Nintendo RPG, but it is all adventure all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you are playing a role, I guess. You are playing as someone, but in that way, aren't we always doing that in video games? And honestly, RPG, the G is definitely in quotes at certain times because, yeah, it's a game, but it's almost just like To the Moon, kind of you're constantly clicking on something to progress the story.
Right.
That's the kind of game.
I would say it's like a narrative adventure game. That's how I would describe it for sure.
Yep,
yeah,
for sure.
Very much so. But let's get into the specifics of it so folks have an idea of what they're about to get into. About the game. Dr. Rosaline and Dr. Watts have peculiar jobs. They give people another chance to live, all the way from the very beginning, but only in their patients' heads. Due to the severity of the operation, the new life becomes the last thing the patients remember before drawing their last breath. Thus, the operation is only done to people on their deathbeds to fulfill what they wish they had done with their lives, but didn't. Finding Paradise is the second full episode in the To the Moon series. Stick a pin in that because I want to mention that to you guys. It follows the life of the doctor's new patient, Colin, as they attempt to unravel a life that is split down the middle and fulfill a wish that appears to be self-contradictory by nature. So, if you've played To the Moon, if you're familiar with the structure of that game, this is very much a sequel to it in that it is mapping to a similar format, and as we'll get into in the spoilers section, there's also kind of a reason that this game's runtime is about twice as long as To the Moon. They do a good job of building on what they've done. But yes, the general setup here is that these doctors are going in and basically trying to traverse through their patient, Colin, in this game, traverse through Colin's life, starting from the oldest memories and then working their way back to both understand what it is that he wants and also try to give it to him. And then, hijinks ensue, as they say.
So there's your basic overview of Finding Paradise, I'd say. And honestly, Steve pretty much nailed all the topics that need to be said, I think. But in terms of gameplay, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very, like, if anybody's listening right now that has played To the Moon or at least understands the type of game that is, this is does not stray really far from that type of gameplay. You're walking around the world, clicking on things to try to progress the story in a certain direction and basically just get a better understanding of what you're doing as the two doctors in Colin's head for most of the time. It's worth mentioning that there is some infrequent action-y sections
right,
and like JRPG type sections strewn throughout the game that kind of break up some of the basic gameplay that you're constantly having, which honestly, that's not the type of game this is, but it definitely made me smile when those sections came up like that. And I think that's the point, right? It's always kind of like a meme a little bit to throw that stuff in there, and it's supposed to make the player laugh a little bit, I think, and I just love that. So anything else to speak on in terms of gameplay?
Yeah. So again, we're going to be mirroring in this upfront section before we get into spoiler discussion, which is really going to be the meat. We're going to be mirroring a lot of the things we said about To the Moon because this game is in the same engine, in the same style. Like in terms of presentation, there are some upgrades, I think, but I would attribute most of those to like familiarity with the engine and maybe like skill and team size over like a drastic technological shift. But in terms of the like minute to minute gameplay, it follows the same pattern of To the Moon, where you dive into an important memory into Colin's life, you explore around, you'll talk to some of the characters, you'll see what it is, whatever. Maybe it's just him feeding the ducks outside of his retirement home, maybe it's him attending the birth of his child, whatever it might be. And as you navigate around, you will find different objects that have, I guess, consolidated memories, but really it's sort of just like an adventure game point and click hunt to get these little colored orbs, and then you'll find one object in that scene that links you to another scene. That's how the doctors need to navigate from scene to scene. So you'll find like a clock on the wall, and when you put all the orbs into that clock, it lets you jump to another memory further back in the past that also had a clock on the wall. They have to like have one object that links the two memories. And then when you find all those things and when you do that jump, there's also like a little puzzly mini game that was similar to the one that was in To the Moon. I feel like they, when we talked about To the Moon, I talked about how I don't know that those were really that necessary. I feel like they took the feedback of we should make these puzzles more diverse and more interesting. I still don't know if they needed to be here, but they do mix things up a little bit. And the puzzles are kind of hard to describe. I don't know if either of you feel confident enough to say how they work, but they're kind of odd.
I would say that it's like, imagine like a match 3, but it's more like a sliding match 3, I guess. You're sliding columns and rows of like images to like, so the good example is the clock. You're going to do 3 of these clocks in a row, and then that fills up a gauge. And then they change it up. Sometimes like there'll be little icons that make the items disappear and then like change the direction of the sliding puzzles. But they're usually, you just kind of tinker with it for like, I'd say like 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes max, and then you'll solve the puzzle. They're never really too challenging, I wouldn't say.
No, and it's funny you said that. Like you were like sliding match. Like I literally wrote down sliding match puzzle game because I don't know how else to describe it either. But it is cool that they had like the multi-directional stuff and like a little bit where it's like you have to think a little bit harder, I think, than the other game where everything is right there for you. You can create things and lose things. I thought it was an interesting diversion from the gameplay. I don't know if it was necessary either still, but at the same time, it definitely didn't put a damper on the rest of the game, I guess.
Yeah. I do think it gives you like a moment to like think about the scene before, because I mean the writing in this game is what you're here for. Everybody, I feel like they did a good job between this game and then the last game of having a specific voice for the character that you're like trying to discover who they are and things. Like they could have just wrote it in the same exact voice as the previous character, but I think Colin is like a unique individual, and you really do like through his dialogue and things that have happened, you feel like you start to understand and know Colin just by, you know, seeing all the things he's been through. And of course, the main two doctors it's the same two doctors from the first game that we just get to learn a little bit more about them throughout this, which we'll talk in the spoiler talk about. But yeah, I do think that the puzzles do help you sit there for a minute and just be like, okay, so this happened and then that happened. And then you're kind of working through a puzzle real quick while you're kind of like stewing in the moment of the story beats. I do think that's probably what they're going for, but yeah, I don't know if it's completely necessary.
I will say, I don't know if this happened to either of the two of you, but you click on the object to enter into the puzzle. You say like, yes, I want to jump to the next memory. You do the puzzle, you feel the gauge, it says like, da-da-da-da, congrats, you did it. And then it goes back to the scene, the memory that you were already in, and then you need to click on the object again to actually make the jump. For some reason, my brain always assumed that once I filled the gauge and finished the puzzle that it was just going to jump me to the next memory. So it would jump back to the previous memory, and I would sit there for like 4 or 5 seconds thinking that's like loading or something, and then I'd be like, oh, I have to click on it. And it was a habit that I never broke the entire time. I did it the whole game. I constantly just like sat there. That is not anything to knock or critique the game on. That is just my pathetic brain not teaching or not learning something that it was taught 20 times in a row, but that's still funny.
Yeah, I think that my incessant clicking that I do in all games that I play allowed me to avoid that, because even if I sat there for like half a second, I was like, "No, what's next?" Click, 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 click. Because I don't know how you guys play this. I assume you played it with mouse and keyboard, right? Because I don't think there's really any other way to
actually.
Play it. Maybe you could have plugged a controller.
I played it on using the Steam Link app on my smart TV with a Steam controller, and it worked really well. Now the game, when you do that, the game has keyboard prompts. Like it doesn't have controller support, so I had to like, you know, in my mind map to when they say WASD or they say escape. But yeah, it was really slick getting to just play it up on the big TV with a controller.
Yeah,
it was
that'd
nice.
be sweet.
Yeah, I mean, this just sounds like me complaining maybe, but that's a part of this that I wish there was a little more freedom for, because I feel like I was stuck in like a 1068 by 760 or some weird resolution, and I wanted to like see it like super crisp, and it seemed a little blurry on my display just because of the tech. I think it's just because it's in Game Maker, right? Like it's this older tech. But to me, I was like, it still looked pretty, but I wish it was just a little crisper. That was just my like one little complaint for the graphics itself. But I still think it was a pretty game. So
yeah, I found out when I was doing a little bit of research, obviously this game was made in RPG Maker, but it was actually the XP version.
Oh, wow.
Of RPG Maker.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, it is why. I mean, so my computer figured it out pretty easily and sorted it, so I didn't have the resolution problems you were having, but it definitely, like, as soon as I clicked on the app for Finding Paradise, my computer would bug out really quick and like try to figure out what's the best resolution and then put it back on the screen and shrink it down. And I mean, it was still pretty. Like, it was definitely still pretty, which we'll be getting to presentation here in a moment. But yeah, that would be frustrating.
I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Good. All right, I use mouse and keyboard. I just use a mouse for everything. I was just sitting back, just clicking on things, and I thought that worked pretty good, except for some of the other gameplay moments where you have to use the keyboard, which we'll talk about later. But yeah,
I don't want to brag, but you know, Steam Link figured it out pretty quick. It was nice. It was full screen. It was crispy, ran well. Mm-hmm. So if you have access to a physical Steam Link, or you do have a smart TV that has the Steam Link app, I think only certain Android TVs do. It works pretty well, and I would definitely recommend doing it that way. It was a good experience. Hearing that. And maybe this will transition us a little bit into talking about the music for a sec, but hearing that soundtrack coming through like the nice sound bar and through my nice home theater system was like, ooh, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You guys want to talk about music now? Then I was going to transition us into presentation, but we can just talk about music and then lump presentation in if you want to.
I think that's kind of the music goes hand in hand with presentation for this game, right?
Yeah.
I would say.
Yep.
Yeah. They're pretty tight together.
I would say the music is super moving and beautiful and wonderful and touching and incredible and all the positive words, right?
I mean, it's so good, right? Again, to parrot myself, similar to the Moon. Lots of piano, like a lot of good like themes and melodies that come up in different versions and in different tracks. It's actually relevant to, well, not like super relevant, but as part of the story, Colin plays the cello, and so there's pieces that will like mix those same themes you're hearing on piano with cello, and there's duets with cello and piano. It's gorgeous.
So I think my takeaway for the music is the song, the To the Moon theme, which becomes known as For River, is extremely good and probably is better, to me, in my opinion, better than any song in this game. But I think the overall collection of songs in this game is better than To the Moon, if that makes sense, right?
Right.
I would prefer to listen to For River on its own before anything in either game, but then I would rather listen to this from beginning to end than To the Moon. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think part of that is just, it feels like there's just more music in this game.
Yeah.
To the Moon was like, it had, For River, it had a couple other tracks, and then it had like some mixes of For River. But this game, I feel like, has like an album's length worth of different music and a lot of different like vibes to the songs. Some are more tense, some are more relaxing, some are very sad, some are very uplifting. So they do a really good job.
Yeah, it has the suite of motions, and then like this has a main thing too. It's the scales theme, I guess, something like that, right? Yeah. So basically, it's this is story relevant, kind of, but it's basically the cello playing scales with piano accompaniment. And I think the way they did that, and then of course it's very integral to the story. Every time I heard that, I was like, wow, like it was like a gut punch, like in a good way, like, oh, that's so good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very much so.
So I think that kind of transitions us into like overall presentation, right? And to me, this is what you come to this game for, is the presentation. Like this is why you're here. If you're playing this game and you heard about it from anybody, this is what you're here for, right? The story, the writing, even the graphical style in a lot of ways, right? It's really what makes it. It's why we're here. And to me, just to start, I think Kan Gao is like, he is so good at writing.
It makes
it
no
is
sense
so
to me.
good. It's just like, I can't, like, to have, because usually with a lot of AAA games, there's a lot of writers and they kind of bounce things off each other. To have one person, from my understanding, basically write this thing from beginning to end. I'm sure he had some people edit it and stuff like that, but like this thing, he just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, all the writing's very natural. All the dialogue flows super well. It's very believable. Like, it all is conversations that you would believe people are actually having. And then what always impresses me in this game is they do so much with like a handful of like little animations for the characters, like and small things, right? Like little pauses before the next dialogue box comes up, or like them like shifting or like looking back and forth. These little tiny like character movements add like so much weight, and they do such a good job of telling you what's going on in that character's head and like what they're feeling. I think better than most other RPGs, like famous RPGs that you'd see in this style. Final Fantasy VI or something, characters will have their like 10 animations that they employ at the right time. And that is like effective enough. But in this game, it's like, it really feels like they specifically went into each scene and being like, for every single line of dialogue, they said, do we have something that perfectly fits the body language for this? If so, okay, cool, let's use it. If not, we need to make one more thing to fit the body language, because they're so focused on that like impact, that punch.
Right.
Even a scowl.
Yeah.
Just a furrow of the brow. It's so simple, but man, you know exactly what that sprite is feeling right then. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, and then they got those little like question mark boxes that pop up when someone's having an internal thought. Like, somebody will say something and they don't have nothing to say. You can see them thinking, and occasionally a character will like look down at his feet too. like with its eyes, just little things like that. So subtle, but like you guys say, it just adds just that much more, and it kind of makes this feel like something you don't. For me, like, okay, I was gonna try to, like, let's just be honest. I started playing this yesterday, and then I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna like play 2 hours and then take a break, and then play 2 hours and take a break, something like that. I just sat there like a good book and just like could not stop playing. When I started getting into the story, I was like, oh, there's a twist happening. I cannot wait to see what happens next. And I think that just like the presentation adds to like that moment of like, oh, I'm starting to feel this character's, like, I actually feel the emotions they're feeling because of just this amazing art style and writing.
Yeah,
you know, it's just all around a great package.
This is not really a spoiler. I mean, I guess you could slightly argue that it is, but this is not necessarily like a revealed plot point, and it's something you learn early. But when I'm talking about how like these animations give character emotion, it's not just like, oh, I can tell from the sprite that this character is angry, or I can tell from the sprite that this character is in a good mood. When the doctors first arrive to Colin's house, Colin's wife, Sophia, you can, when they meet her, she's like kind of cold and kind of distant to them, and you can tell that she like is not really into the idea of the doctors being here or this procedure, but also that she understands that it's not really the doctor's fault that he signed up for this. So she's like simultaneously being distant, but also trying to be like kind of a gracious host and also kind of polite, which is a very subtle mix of things to deliver in the best of circumstances, even if you had like a full voice acted mocapped situation. And all of that complexity, before they even like come out and spell it in the dialogue, you can just tell from the body language of this 16-bit sprite and the way that she walks around the room and the way that she pauses before saying things and like where the ellipses are in the dialogue and stuff. It's so impressive.
And it's funny because each of us, everybody who's ever played this game, has been not in that exact position, but we've all felt how Sophia feels at some point.
Yep.
And they do such a good job at portraying that. Like, this is just this very basic graphical style, but I know exactly how she's feeling because I've been there. Like, it's just so cool.
Yeah, just phenomenally well done. And to make one like last presentation comparison to the Moon, they do play with the fact that this is in RPG Maker and in like the 16-bit style a little bit more than To the Moon did. To the Moon had its fun with it, and I think it was good. But this game, you can tell, just kind of feels like a little bit bigger in scope and a little more. There's just more variety of situations going on, and they have a variety of like visual representations of that to match, and it's very like choice. Good stuff. Way to go, art team.
Yes. Yep. So the last like two things that I want to mention for presentation, and I'm sure Josh has some wrap up thoughts too before I imagine we're going to be getting on to our main feelings of the game. But we got, Steve, you were touching on this. Character animations in this game are much improved, like in terms of like, their facial expressions and things like that. But there's a main character that we'll talk about a little bit more in the spoiler section. But Faye, there's a time when Faye does like a front handspring. And I was just like, whoa. Like it was just insane. I was like, I don't even know how they managed to animate that and to use just those couple sprites for that. Like that was just for that scene. Like things like that, and flying. They do some flying in the game and things like that. It's just like, it's really good. It's really well done, especially in comparison to what was in To the Moon. Like I think that can't be understated. Like it's animation and they Kangao really nailed it. Really started drilling down and honing his craft in this game for sure. And then I just wanted to mention there are insane amount of references to different pop culture,
right,
and media and different video games, and it's hilarious. Like we'll probably talk a little bit more about it in the spoiler section, but Neil does a lot of references, and to me, it just got a smile on my face every time. Yeah,
it's just they're not afraid to throw. This game is very heavy. There's a lot of heavy themes, but they're not afraid to make that one-liner joke here and there to like lighten the mood. I appreciate that a lot. One thing I did want to mention for the presentation, just to wrap it up, and then we can go into our overall thoughts, is for a 16-bit game, like the lighting in this game impressed me. Like there's a specific scene where they're like on an island setting. I won't go into any more detail than that, but like there's like this like warm sunset tones, like, and then you go on the beach, you can see the sun going down. I'm like, dang, this is like painterly levels of lighting in this game. And every time they did something like that, it was just like, wow, they're pulling all the stops they can with this like kind of limited engine. So I think it's pretty impressive all in all.
Yeah, he definitely pushed it. Like they really pushed it. I got about everything out of it that they could. I think like it was really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the elevator pitch is obviously, this is a very moving story that is told in a 16-bit RPG style. But if you're just thinking of like Final Fantasy 4 or whatever it might be, Secret of Mana, like that gets you a good idea, but they definitely took extra care and are like absolutely maximizing the way that this looks in a way that those older games couldn't, because those older games had, technical limitations, storage limitations, times, budgets and stuff. Like it's this is definitely like one step above what those ever looked like.
Yeah. So guys, it sounds like we all love this game, but is this a recommended game, and is it a main quest game? Whoever wants to jump in first here.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, dude. That's an easy main quest. So I am a massive To the Moon fan. That was main quest, and To the Moon was one of my favorite games of the generation. When I did like my games of the decade list sometime back. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think I like Finding Paradise more than To the Moon. I mean,
wow.
That's a bold statement.
To the Moon,
yeah.
To the Moon has like, you always have to balance it was the first one, and a lot of what Finding Paradise does builds on To the Moon, so there is no Finding Paradise without To the Moon. But I think that the Finding Paradise, like overall, I think it's a more like complete package. I think the presentation delivers more. I think the writing is improved. I think that the themes of Finding Paradise that we'll get into in the spoiler section are much more like resonant and relatable and like immediately impactful to me as a person, and something that I can take away. And yeah, I just think that it excelled basically in every way, and it had the very difficult task of following up To the Moon, both in like sort of the expectations of emotional impact and also like the level of writing, and it somehow managed to hit those and do things I wasn't expecting. So 2 thumbs way up.
So Josh, just so you know, whenever we decide to redo the artwork for IndieQuest, you're gonna have to throw a paper airplane in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now for Steve.
That is definitely something I've been thinking about lately. So
my personal thoughts. Easy main quest, just like Steve said. I don't even think I can hardly say anything that Steve didn't already say. For me personally, and I think Steve is right, it's a lot of nostalgia. Even though I just played To the Moon this year, like I'm already, and that's the kind of game even Finding Paradise is as well. Like playing all the way through it, I thought it was a great game, but just finished it last night, and this morning I'm thinking back on it and feeling nostalgic about my experience with it, which I think is it's a credit to the developer and how well they create a world.
Yeah.
For me personally, I think To the Moon is just slightly better in my book. But if To the Moon's like a 9.8 type game, which I personally think it's a near perfect game for what they had and what they put out, this is like a 9.5. Yeah. Like it's still an excellent game. The story, which we'll get into the Moon, for Steve, this was more relatable. For that one, it was more relatable for me personally, the other one. But both great games. And I think some of the characters in that game versus this one I like a little bit more, but still the characters in this game are amazing. And like I said, there are many different levels of main quest, and this is like very near the top. Yeah. Like for me this year, since joining this podcast, besides To the Moon and of course Death's Door, I don't know if I can really think of another main quest game that I would rate higher than Finding Paradise. So
awesome. And while I'm here, I'm just going to say, well, for me, it's a main quest. You guys are trying to like make me pick my children here, like which one's better. But I think that, and honestly, because the themes of the game are all about like experiences in life, I think that it's going to affect people differently just because of the people's experiences. So for me, I think the story was more impactful for me for Finding Paradise. But I think To the Moon, it's just hard for me to pick. It might be a little bit better and edge it out, but I would say if you guys want to play Finding Paradise, to play To the Moon first for sure. That is something you have to do. Like the story does carry on and they build upon it in a really nice way. But for me, I don't know if I could pick, but if I had to pick, I would probably say To the Moon's a little better, like Seth was saying, but it's like so close that it's kind of like they're basically tied. But yeah, main quest with a bullet, man.
You're getting into like we're splitting hairs about which one's better in the way where it's like it's fun to debate about two things you really love, but it does not matter. These are both, high recommendations. I will say, to echo what Josh said, 100% do not play this game if you have not played To the Moon. Like, hard stop, you have to play them in order. I didn't realize until going through this game that the side game that they released in between them, A Bird Story, would be as story relevant as it was. Like, we'll get into that in the spoiler section afterwards, but had either of you ever played A Bird Story before?
I have not.
So. I have not either. So you have?
I did Steve? Years ago. I had forgotten a decent amount of it, but it came up enough times in the story where I went back and I looked up like a little bit of a synopsis and like skimmed through. But I will say, if you're going to play this game, definitely play To the Moon, and I would say play A Bird Story. Also, in the credits, they literally lay out the order of the games you should play, and it included two like Sigmund Corp mini episodes that I did not know existed. So I would say seek those out as well. I didn't have time, and I don't think either of my hosts here had time to check those out prior to us recording, but it seems like everything that they release in and around this universe is story relevant in some way and like builds to the overall structure of the story. So at minimum, I would say play To the Moon. At recommendation, I would say play To the Moon and A Bird Story, but if you really want to go deep, also check out those mini episodes.
Cool.
Awesome. Anything you guys want to bring up before we go into the gloves off spoiler section?
Do we want to do our plugs and normal outro? I think that's what we did for To the Moon.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, we should say goodbye to the kind folks that haven't played this yet. Also, if you're someone out there with a little morbid curiosity, I'm going to beg you, don't stick around. Don't listen to the spoiler discussion. I want you to experience this yourself. Pause this podcast, go play, then come back and you can finish it. And, it'll be so satisfying to hear the specific story beats. But yeah. For those of you that are leaving now, hey, thank you for checking out this episode so far. We appreciate you. We are part of the Polymedia Network, so you can check out a whole bunch of other shows as well by going to polymedianetwork.com. If you want to get a hold of this show, you can do so at IndieQuest Pod on Twitter or at IndieQuestPodcast@gmail.com.
IndieQuestPod@gmail.com.
My brain is, without my notes in front of me, my brain is breaking. But yeah, where can they find you guys?
I am at Captain Drachma on Twitter. I'm in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet. I'm going to just sprint through these plugs because I want to talk to my boys about this game. So, all
right, you can find me at Frantic Society on Twitter. I'm trying to rush through it too. Play this game and play To the Moon. They're both pretty digestible length too. You could probably sit through and do it in an afternoon if you push through them. So, and you're going to want to. They're very good games. So.
Yeah, runtime on this one's about 5 hours, and I'm at Blinkoom on Twitch and Twitter, so you can find me there.
Yeah,
M like ooh a moon.
That's good.
Okay.
So if you're still here, I'm giving you a few seconds until I finish this sentence to leave, because we're about to enter the spoiler zone.
Spoiler zone.
Spoiler zone.
guys think? I mean, how'd you feel about the story?
Oh, we're doing it now, huh?
Just go right in.
All
Jump right in.
It's truly over. Stop listening. All right, here we go.
I mean,
I thought it was awesome.
I did too. Is it worth giving kind of like a high level overview of the broad story here, or do you want to just start diving in minute to minute?
That's up to if you guys want to go broad story. Honestly, I just have like a list of things that are like, what about this cool thing? What about that cool thing? So, yeah, Steve, if you want to give a story overview, go for it.
I don't have this written down, so I'll do the best that I can. And I know I won't unnecessarily go into spoilers where I can, but you are in a spoiler zone, so you're going to get spoiled. So the doctors arrive to Colin's house. They start diving into his memories. Unlike Into the Moon, they don't actually jump chronologically in reverse order. They actually start jumping from like his oldest memory to his newest memory to his second oldest to his second newest. Like wah, 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 wah. They described it.
They call it like
a decaying orbit, yeah, which I think is really good.
Decaying orbit,
and you're sort of like centering in to one specific event in his life. In the older memories, it's a lot of him and his wife Sophia doing the things you'd expect. Again, raising their kid, proposing, all the sort of like big beats that you'd expect to be in someone's life. They're having the birth of their child, all that stuff. And then in his younger memories, it's almost exclusively with him and his friend who lives across the like alley or on another high rise across on another balcony. Mm-hmm. And then that also goes to a like neighboring school named Faye. And it's a lot of memories of him and Faye, childhood, teenage, up to the point where she sort of like convinces him to follow his dream of becoming a pilot. And so then it's him going through pilot school and flight training and eventually learning to become a pilot. And all those are sort of coalescing down to this center memory, which is where I'm not going to necessarily give it up right now, but it's where he sort of has to like separate his life with Faye and start his life with Sophia. Basically, it's sort of in that bridge point. And then from there, things go haywire. I don't know if you want to mention that now.
So I just want to touch on that the decaying orbit that Steve just mentioned is extremely important. This game would not have worked without it. It wouldn't work if it did the same thing that To the Moon did. It had to bounce back and forth to a certain point to finally get to that midpoint that changed everything. Because if it just went straight through, about 2.5 hours in, everything would be spoiled for you. Like, it was very necessary, which I thought was very well done. Like, and I did not expect it. I'm like, okay, this is a To the Moon sequel. I obviously understand things that came out of To the Moon, and this isn't going to be as new of an experience for me. But because of that, it made it very unexpected what was going to happen, I guess.
Yeah, I think that they do a really good job in this one. I think a little more than the previous game of building that mystery. Like you start building theories like, okay, so this person talked to this person, then they did this. So who is this person? You start like kind of in your head or writing it down, whatever, trying to like piece it all together. And I think that having that mystery throughout the entire thing, like I felt it till the end of the game. Like, what is this thing going to happen? Like, what is going on? Like, what happens between him and Faye? Like at the beginning, what's going on with that relationship? What happened? They seem so close. And then you have this wife relationship that he keeps having regrets with his wife. And you're like, there's a regret here and there. That's another system we can talk about. But like, he's just like, didn't seem super positive about his relationship with his wife. And you're like, why?
Yeah.
And then like, he has this super positive relationship with this past person. Like, why? You know what I mean? So all this does get solved by the end of the game. But I think that the storytelling, like kind of out of chronological order, really helped build that like suspension and mystery throughout the entire thing.
Absolutely. And I will be completely honest with both of you. And I completely 100%, you can tell her, Steve, I blame Leah.
I do too, but why?
Because you mentioned, and I think she mentioned too when you were streaming once, that she figured out the story of To the Moon.
Yep.
And so this entire game, the entire time I was playing through, I was trying to figure it out, and I shouldn't have done that, like, because I did eventually figure it out, or basically I got to the point where I was like, oh, this is what's going on.
I mean, it gets increasingly obvious, but yeah.
Right, yeah.
It does. And it was about 3 hours in. So I had another 2 hours to go, and honestly another hour and a half to go before the game was finally like, this is what's going on. So from then on, I'm like, if it isn't this, then I'll be very surprised. But I imagine that this is what's happening.
I will say,
but yeah.
Leah also called it again this time because she sat in the room with me the whole time that we played, and she was like,
That's funny.
Probably about 2 hours in, she's like, I think this is what's going on. So I mean,
yeah,
we're in the spoiler section. We can just come out and say it. We don't need to beat around the bush. But what we ultimately learn about Faye, about Colin's childhood friend, is that it's his imaginary childhood friend. So she is not a real person, and actually he spent a lot of his childhood without a lot of friends, but he would write a lot in his this green notebook that becomes story relevant. And the scenes where we're seeing him and Faye is actually him like kind of writing a version of that scene in that notebook, and that's how he like sort of lives in his imaginary world. And so, you know, everything that Faye pushes into, Faye is much more outgoing, much more like energetic. Again, she encourages him to go to flight school. Yep. She just like encourages him to push his comfort zone. And that is sort of him imagining someone that helps him to do those things that he doesn't feel like he has the courage or the ability to do himself.
This was later on in my notes, but I'm just going to, since we're talking about Faye now, to me, Faye is Colin's extroverted side that he doesn't know how to show to the world, but it is internalized. He knows it's there. It's his confident side, because obviously Faye is an extension of Colin, right? Like Faye was always Colin at the end of the day, because that's how his brain was working and how he was processing everything he was going through. So he was never outward about it, but Faye was always there pushing him to do the things that he was scared of doing. And really it was just his consciousness pushing him, right, to do things that he was uncomfortable with, which I think is, I don't know, great, especially once you figure it out. It's like you start, you know, thinking about the game in that way, and it's like, oh man, like this is really, it makes so much more sense now that this is happening, especially when, and there's certain situations where it's like, that's when I started to figure it out. I was like, how is Faye even there? Like, why is Faye there? But you're kind of like, oh, whatever, you know. But then it's like, no, she really, the part that I think I really figured it out was when he decided she convinced Colin to go and talk to the owner of the airport. And it's like that whole sweet Godfather scene, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, what is Faye doing in there? Like, why is Faye, like, she just keeps like prodding him, like, come on. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And it's like, that seems a little unrealistic. And then I was like, I bet she's not there. So that's kind of,
I like how they played with memory too. Like in that whole Godfather scene, like, you know, that's how he wrote it in his journal, like that scene.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's true.
That Faye was there and she was there along with him, and they're, you know, freaking, you have an offer that you can't refuse, all that stuff. And then like, when he's in the like school, and they have like the lockers that look like giant trees, you know, and I'm sure that's how he described it in his journal. Like the lockers were so tall, to me they look like giant trees, you know, something descriptive like that, you know, when you're writing prose. So I think that a lot of that like childhood imagination factor was there. So to me, like when we went back in time, I was like, I don't know how much of this is real, because like there's so many like fantastical things that keep happening. So I never really pieced it together 100% that Faye was like a fake person, but I was like, I don't understand like how Faye could be here or there. I was like, is the journal, like, is this a story that he told himself, or what's going to happen? Like, and then of course they piece it together, and then once you piece it together, they literally like flat out tell you, so you don't like miss the twist, I guess, you know, in the story. So, but yeah, I did think that just having the more playful look to everything when you were like a kid, it was nice. And then like you had Roo Dog, like he showed up many times, and I want a Roo Dog plush so bad now that it's like hurting me. So yeah, I just thought that was a really cool reveal, and they did build it up really well. So,
and in keeping with a lot of the like themes and tones and characters in this game. It is multi-layered, and like kind of dancing around this a little bit because even though in their spoiler sections, it is kind of directly relevant to the events of A Bird Story. Like Faye does not show up in A Bird Story at all, and he does talk about the events of A Bird Story in Finding Paradise. Talks about like having a bird that he raised when he was younger, but like Faye is not only she very much is 100% like his extroverted side coming out, encouraging him to do things he's not comfortable with, but she's also simultaneously like him sort of coping with not having a lot of friends growing up and being lonely. And specifically like a friend that stays with him and is in like will always be around for him, which is like sort of something that was relevant and that he struggled with during A Bird Story. And so they're tying that piece in and then also showing you this other side of him where he needs a prod sometimes. He needs to go in and do something, which is why it's really interesting. The wish, I think, was a really good setup in this game. So to the moon, the wish was very clear. He says, I want to go to the moon. And the mystery of that game is like, what the hell? Okay, I guess if that's what you want to do. You don't really realize what that means to him and why. In this game, he doesn't like really have a wish. Like he basically says like, I liked my life. I liked my wife. I liked my kid. And that's true. I don't think he was ever unhappy in that. I think he was happy with all his parts. He's just like, I just wish I just wish that there was more. He's sort of like at the end of his life looking back and being like, damn, all those roads not traveled, all the little things that I could have done differently. I just don't want to regret those. And so as the doctors are going back through his memories, they're constantly being like, there's not a lot for us to grab here. Like, it's like, maybe it's this, they ultimately come to the conclusion of like, oh, well, we now Faye is his imaginary friend. Maybe we need to get rid of Faye. And even that is like a wrong conclusion for them to draw because in reality, there's nothing there. It's them like trying to find a way to grant him a wish that they really can't. They just need to like help him sort of come to terms with his life as it already was, basically.
Yeah. And I do think like ultimately the doctors kind of almost fail their way into victory with this one. Like what was the quote? Like basically he wanted somebody to see Faye for the first time because he's seen her his whole life basically until he kind of had that loss of innocence moments, which is, of course is like the center of the vortex where he's like, well, I can't keep living in, La La Land. I have to be at reality. I'm an adult now. And so basically it was nice for him, his subconscious, to actually be able to present itself to somebody. I think that was pretty much what he ended up wanting. Somebody else to see this imaginary side that he's kind of like lived with his whole life.
Yes. And that once you realize that, it is like, oh, that is really good storytelling because he just wanted to be freed from living in his own head. He wanted to be able to because obviously he was always nervous about people knowing, at least that's what I took from it, because he would constantly replace the pages in his journal and use imaginary ink and things like that. So I don't think he wanted the whole world to know that he had an imaginary friend until he was a young adult, right? That at least that's the way I took from it, or what I took from it. Not to toot my own horn, but the very first note I wrote was, it seems like Sigmund itself is going to be something has to do with Sigmund itself. You start to notice from the very beginning that Sophia is not sure about using Sigmund, and yet Colin is. So you can kind of always tell from the very beginning that there is something that's going to happen with like them, the company as a whole, rather than being a innocent bystander or basically just the driving force. Like that is actually a variable this time. Like something is weird with Sigmund.
Yeah, so much for me. Like throughout. So when you're going back in time and like Rosaline starts seeing like little shadows of people and things like that, I'm like, oh, so maybe he already did Sigmund in the past, like too soon or something. So there's somebody like trapped inside his mind or something. That's what I thought at first.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
it's true. There was somebody trapped inside his mind. We just not that.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of like trying to piece the story together. That was my first theory. I was like, okay, so this maybe he was about to die at some other point in his life, and he tried Sigmund before. So there's some like fragment of somebody in there. Of course, that's not what ended up happening, but that's
a really solid takeaway.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's what I thought at first, like before, of course, everything got revealed. But yeah.
I think that this is so smart of Kangao. Like, the idea that you've built this universe, or you've built this world where there is this company that can help you go back and like fix your big regrets in life, or help you do the things you wish you hadn't done. To then have someone like Colin, who doesn't, basically what he lacks ultimately is confidence in every aspect of his life, including at the end of his life, he lacks the confidence to know, did I live a good life? So he is feeling unsure. He's sort of like waffling and being like, was this right for me? Was this life enough? And then just the fact that Sigmund exists as an option is sort of like the straw that breaks the camel's back, where he's like, well, gosh, if I have to take this chance, if there is these people that can go in and help me. But in reality, there's nothing they can really do for him, because, I mean, there's things that he certainly wants, like, someone to meet Faye and stuff. But ultimately, the sort of like central thesis of the game is the things you regret are part of your story. They're part of your path. They're part of what got you here. And there isn't always an easy way out for someone to go in and fix that. That's not necessarily the solution. It's yeah, man, your life was the way it was, and you either can love that and celebrate that, or not. And what's so smart, oh my god, it like blew my mind. Granted, I'm like weeping as this part is happening.
Yeah, but I mean, we all cried, right?
Oh,
we all cried. 100%. I know I did.
The very end, Sigmund ultimately comes to the same conclusion that I'm describing. They say, hey, we're the problem. Our presence here at all is just causing more problems than anything. They actually turn control over to Faye, being like, you know him, you can help him come to terms with this better than we can. Also, there's like a time pressure in the actual story too that's causing them to make this decision.
Right, yeah.
But what I think is so smart is that when we see like a montage of most of the scenes that we've already seen, and a couple of new ones, and the scenes where he's talking to Faye when he's younger, she doesn't like remove herself. She doesn't replace those. Instead, she shows both the like conversation that they're having on the balcony, and also shows him writing in the book at the same time. She like, it gives him perspective, like, yeah,
so good.
This wasn't really happening, but also, the feelings you had and the conversations that you had with your imaginary friends still count. They're still relevant. Like, they're still part of your life. And then later in life, for things like the scene where they're on like vacation after they're about to get married, they show like him spilling lemon juice or whatever. And in the original game, when we saw that scene, that was kind of the end. In this, now you see a much longer scene, or it shows like the proposal that he did with skywriting, and he regretted that there was like typo, like that the person who wrote it had bad grammar.
Mary.
Yeah.
But then they show that same thing unchanged, still has those, but then they show their beautiful wedding right after. So they're showing like, yeah, man, these things that you regret, that you've been fixating on, happened, and you can feel however you want about them. You can regret them still, but like, stop ignoring all the important stuff that happened as a result of that. And it was just like, so good.
Yeah, whenever they started popping up the regrets, I'm like, it's nothing major. Like, he gets sprayed with squid ink. I was like, that's a cute story you tell your kid. Right? Like, it's nothing bad.
I mean, I think a lot of it was like, no one has a perfect life.
No.
But you had a pretty perfect life. Like, you really did. And the whole imaginary friend thing, I think initially is probably supposed to make us feel like, well, that's kind of weird to have an imaginary friend to early adulthood. But who of us doesn't constantly think of these things and almost have like an internalized talking to yourself type of deal, right? We might not say my subconscious is a totally different person, but we all do what Colin does and bounces ideas off inside your head. That's what he was doing for most of his life. And then he removed that and replaced that with Sophia in a lot of ways. And that wasn't a bad thing either. Like, he really didn't ever do anything that was like, yeah, he really had no major regrets. And that's what he was, I think they were trying to show us.
Yeah, he at the end, they show like the beautiful montage. And of course he talks to Faye, and she's like, well, you have all those regrets. He's like, yeah, I had them all, but they kind of don't matter in the long run. I had a great life, and that's pretty much the thesis, right, of the whole game. And it's just like, you're sitting there like I can barely read this anyway. I'm like a sobbing mess. But yeah, it's just such a beautiful message, and it's very touching too. I really enjoyed just like I said, the mystery all the way to the fun they have with the RPG stuff, which we can talk about in a minute, and just all the way to the end and just how they concluded it all. I just thought it was such a beautiful thing to see. I feel like I saw somebody's life before my eyes, which is pretty much what they're going for here, obviously, but I just loved it.
Yeah.
I will say I didn't full out cry until, which is, I think it's just like, how is this? He's so good at it.
Are you going to talk about the kiss at the end?
Yes, I was starting to get choked up. Yeah. But it was just like the rocket and To the Moon. It was the same. I was like, honestly, I was thinking like, yeah, this is definitely like a really good story. But honestly, I think I'm good. Like, I don't think nothing's going to happen to me. Nothing's going to happen in this game that's going to make me like break down right now. Like, it's very touching. But yeah, of course, when he goes to kiss her in his memory and she goes to kiss him when he's dying, it's like, okay,
so beautiful.
That's enough. Enough. Like, how do you do that? And then as soon as that happens, you just break down and then credits. How does he do that? Like, he's so good.
A master. He knows what he's doing. And again, the thing that is so impressive to me is the big thing with To the Moon is like its elevator pitch, its selling point is you say, okay, this game looks like an RPG, but it will mess you up. It is so emotional. You will be crying by the end. So in Finding Paradise, you go in and you're like, I have played To the Moon. I have been thinking about To the Moon for a decade. I know what you're trying to do. I have steeled myself. I am ready for your manipulation, your little tactics. And then still, somehow at the end, he's like, oh, I found the chink in the armor. You've got nothing on me. I destroy you. Yeah, it's so effective. It's so good.
It really is.
All right, so what do you guys think about the whole fight scenes between Neil and Faye?
I thought they were awesome. I couldn't help but smile. Like, it was a little. I think part of it is as you're going through those fights, you're thinking that Faye. He kind of presents Faye as like this almost evil entity that is living in Colin's brain still. But as you're going through it, you're doing it for a while, right? Eventually, you're like, no, I'm really fighting Colin. Like, this is Colin that I'm fighting right now. Like, Faye is just an extension of Colin. So then it almost like you get the realization, it's like, no, Colin doesn't want us to do this right now. This is Colin fighting back. And that's when it's like, whoa, like it gets much bigger than what it seems on the surface. But yeah, I love those the
shmup level.
It's just a good break from the yes, that was awesome. Yeah, and the fighting part. They were so, and the RPG part. Oh, I actually lost that a couple times because I didn't understand that. I tried the shoe
and it didn't do nothing.
And then I was like, it did nothing. Why would I use that? Well, then I'm like, I just keep losing. I'm like, well, I'm going to try this shoe again. And then Roo Dog comes. And it's like, heck yeah. That's so awesome.
I lost that too because I actually got Roo Dog. I summoned Roo Dog the first time. So this whole fight scene, like, Faye has become like the end boss of a Final Fantasy game. And you're using all these like...
It's like when you're fighting God.
Yeah, like Armageddon Punch and stuff, like over-the-top dramatic JRPG attacks. And one of your attacks is shoe. You throw the shoe, and it does like no damage, but then Roo Dog, this like Rudolph dog character that they invented, comes running up and joins your party mid-fight. But and Roo Dog has a bunch of their own attacks, like lasers and rockets and stuff. Yep. But one of your options becomes consider Roo Dog, I think. And if you choose that, question Roo Dog. And if you choose that option, it just says like, oh, you remembered that Roo Dog isn't actually real. And so then Roo Dog disappears and you're left on your own. And there's nothing you can do. You got no heal or anything. So you die and you fall from it and had to redo it. It was so funny. There's a lot of times actually where the game kept asking you to like give up and you had to several times choose like keep going. Did any of you ever choose that? I'm wondering what happens if you do. I wonder if there's like a slight story variation or something, because they asked it enough times in enough different ways where I was like, man, you're really trying to test if I'm like willing to push forward on this goal here. It makes me think that I'd be surprised if it just like cut to black and went from there. I would expect that there'd be some other variation, probably leading to the same outcome, but
Yeah, my thought was no. My thought was I never answered it. I just couldn't do it. Right, like I was too invested. But I imagine like some games do. If you press like sometimes if you have a yes or no answer and no is not the correct answer, they'll be like no, you want to choose yes, and they'll keep repeating that over and over again. I figured that's what would happen. Like no, you need to go find Ava. Like that's what you need to do right now. So yeah, you need to keep trying.
Yeah,
like that. But I didn't try it.
I did think about some of the branching paths because at the end, you can kind of pick like when you're doing the mementos, you're like matching them up.
Yeah,
and you like can pick any order and like whatever order like the story makes sense still. So I'm sure there's like a bunch of branching dialogues and paths in that area.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. You talking about like when you're trying to find Faye,
Ava,
or like
yeah.
Faye has like split
Faye.
into all the different memories,
Yeah.
and you're going through. Yeah, it is like what the order I chose, which was like kind of a random order. It felt very natural, and like they would talk about the things I had already done in the next memories, and I was like, wow, either this is like some real good smoke and mirrors, or they like really like accounted for every order that you could do these in, because it made perfect sense the way that I did it, and was like escalating in the right way and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I was like that's impressive right there. You know that they take a lot of care in this game, obviously, but like just thinking about all the work to do like probably like 32 or something branching paths right there. It's like, damn, that's a lot of work.
So one small part that I just really there's a couple left. I'm sure we're going to get into more stuff maybe, but you guys recognized when the doctors went to the high school, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, this is familiar.
It took me a second, but again, freaking genius Leah. The screen had like been there for like one frame, and she's like, "We know this school," and I was like, "Oh yeah, we do."
It's from To the Moon. I was like, it was a smart way to reuse assets and kind of like they did change it up a little bit, but also be like, yeah, I mean, a lot of these old geezers in this area went to school here. It's like, okay, that's a good way to explain it. Yeah, why not?
Well, during that scene when they recognized the high school, did you guys also notice that Colin said, yeah, I used to sit next to a quiet girl, but then she got a friend, and he was happy for her. And I was like, River! Oh, my God. I just loved it so much. That was so good.
They do that a couple times. I love that part, but they do that a couple times.
The callbacks.
They reference it. There's another part where it's like one of his childhood memories, and he like trips and falls. And he like makes a joke like, oh, maybe he died right here, and that's why everything is weird in his memories. And the doctor's
Neil's
no.
like, is that his twin?
Yeah.
You know, and then Rosaline's like,
and
too soon.
Yes, that got me
was
so good.
actually
Maybe he has a
really
twin?
clever, because he says too soon, and then he says like, well, actually, that was actually a little while ago. So they don't give you like an exact time frame, but they like in the middle of this joke are giving you some sort of point of comparison to be like, okay, these events are happening, probably a year or two after the first game or something like that.
Yes. So my thought when Neil said that was that Kangao was making fun of himself a little bit. Because it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
6 years. Yeah. I think it was a little fourth wall breaking. Like, yeah, I know it's been a little while. Like, I'm getting to it. Like, chill out. Like, I'm sure that there was just an outcry for a sequel. What I mean? So he was like making fun of himself.
So thinking about like Neil and Sigmund and things, like, what do you think about this like whole setup, like with Neil like taking snapshots and doing some kind of sketchy crap? I don't know what he's doing, but it makes me want to play the third one so bad just to see what he's doing. Like
Yes. I don't know if you guys look up the cover art, the key art for Imposter Factory. I'm looking at him like, is that Faye on the cover? Like the cover is like a silhouetted woman facing away from the camera. I'm like, is that literally Faye? Is she gonna be doing some messed up in this sequel?
Well, we know she's at least somehow involved, right?
Yeah.
Because that was Neil's whole purpose, was to basically capture her. And I want to say, I was going to get into this a little bit ago. I don't know if you guys picked up on this reference, but when Neil and Ava do that shooty ball thing at Faye when she's like all evil, and it captures her in that like circular thing with the lightning around it.
Yeah.
Right? Do you guys remember that? It was so subtle, and I almost missed it, but it tilts a couple times. Did you guys notice that?
Like a Pokeball?
Pokeball.
Pokemon, yeah. I was like, oh, that's so good. Like, they don't make any direct reference to it, but they're like, oh, first try, like, because it rolls 3 times, like, first try, awesome, I thought that was good. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of part of the point, and I personally love Roxy. I don't think she was in To the Moon at all, but I love the introduction of Roxy.
She's like a Valley girl, like super like peppy type character that has like an underlying like evilness to her, kind of.
Yeah, you can tell her bubbliness is a front,
right,
for how she. I don't think she's a bad person. She's just much more serious than she seems, and she's like, I'm gonna get you, Neil. Like, much, like it's like, oh, okay. But
yeah, and at the end, all 3 of them were like on board, right? They were all working together on whatever this master plan is. We're talking about it like we have no idea what it is. There's people that have probably played all these games listening to this. They're like, you ding dongs, just go play the last one. You'll know exactly what's going on.
Which we probably will at this point. I would assume.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Well. I can't imagine we won't close this out. Although now I want to look up what other stories happened in between this and Imposter Factory. Like when I saw that there was stuff that I missed in the credits for this one, I'm like, oh, I should probably make sure I like do all my homework this time. But also, I'm so nervous about looking anything up because I don't want anything spoiled for Imposter Factory. So I got to figure out like a safe way of doing
like correct order or something, like chronological order to play these. They have some mini episodes, right? Like between again.
Yeah.
So
and I don't know where they are. I didn't look, but like I've never seen where are these things sold, or where can we go play them? Is it like a browser game? Like I don't know where they are.
A Bird Story is one you can go buy.
Yes, Bird Story I do know, but the other 2 I don't know where those are at.
We don't have to do like a full episode on it, but I would love it to like, even if you guys did, but I'd be happy to replay it too. Play a Bird Story just to like circle back and talk about it, because hearing the 2 of you play it, already having the perspective of knowing like Colin's story, I would be very curious to hear how that impacts your enjoyment of that game. It's a lot shorter than these other 2 games too. If memory serves, it's like an hour or 2.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It's like an hour, and I actually looked into a little bit because there's Steam reviews, of course, right? So there were people saying like, definitely play To the Moon before. If you want, play Bird Story. Exactly what you basically said, Steve, like in the Steam reviews. But the thing is, like, in terms of reviews and stuff, nobody really spoiled it, but I knew going in that it was going to be a fantastic game, and it was a fantastic game all the way through, but it still surprises me. Just like To the Moon did. Like, it just blew me away. Like, I just don't... It's just very, very well done. Like, everything is very well done. Like, I can't overstate that enough.
They had so much to subvert, right? Because in a sequel, you can't really... I mean, you could, but you really can't just do the same thing again. Like, if this game was us just going backwards through someone's memories and then learning about some like traumatic event in their childhood that motivated them to have this like abstract wish, it wouldn't have hit nearly as hard, because he'd been like, yeah, I've done this before. But everything about this game, like the structure, the order you play through the memories, but most importantly, like the patient's motivations being, I think, just like much more complex and much more relatable, like much more real world. Like everyone, you don't even have to be at the end of your life to like understand and relate to the feeling of like, one, am I like focusing too much on these things that I regret or these mistakes that I've made? 2, am I like actually taking the time to like presently live my life and celebrate the day to day? All that stuff is like so much more layered than the first game, which one makes for a good sequel, and 2, that's why I keep going back to it. Really feels like Khan and this team like learned every lesson possible from the first one and got better at something they were already good at, and then applied all those skills to this game. And that makes me so pumped for Imposter Factory, because it was 6 years between To the Moon and Finding Paradise, but it was also like 5 years between Finding Paradise and Imposter Factory. So what else are they going to do? I'm so pumped.
So
Yep.
I was actually looking into it, and while you were talking, I don't think there is any mini episodes between Finding Paradise and Imposter Factory. I cannot find anything. So it looks like it's just Finding Paradise, and then that's number 2, and then Imposter Factory is the finale / like, here's everything, wrap up the story. So definitely, I'm looking forward to that. And the description for Imposter Factory is a bonkers time loop tragic comedy murder mystery thriller featuring multiple casualties and a suspicious cat.
Well, yeah, and like the key art that I've seen for this game on like Twitter and stuff is like shots of outer space with like huge like eldritch horror tentacles coming out and stuff. So I'm like,
yeah,
what is going on?
What is this? Yeah.
The only thing that I've heard about Imposter Factory, and I don't think it's spoilery at all, but it focuses much more heavily on Ava and Neil, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? We've built up their storyline through 2 games. It's time to come to some sort of conclusion with them too. Like there was even a little bit of flirting with different relationship things in this game. Like the little girl was like, "Oh, your girlfriend," to Neil when he was walking out and getting his bottle of pills.
Yeah.
And he's like, "It's not really," anyway. And then he just moves on, like there's just a lot of stuff, like so many little things that made this game so great. Like when Neil specifically Neil, but when they initially think that they were selected specifically for Colin because they were the best, and then later on, Neil like I mean, it had to have been a half an hour of gameplay later. Neil's like, "Oh my, Ava, I just thought," and it was like right in the middle of something important. "We weren't selected for this. Somebody else was, so we aren't the best." And Ava's like, "Neil, shut up." Like,
just chill out. Yeah.
You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Yeah.
Yep.
They even do callbacks to the jokes from the first game. Like, you know, when he's doing his like Dragon Ball Kamehameha thing. Yep. She comments on it. Like, you don't want to do that? And he's like, "Nah, I've kind of moved past that. You know, let's just roll through." And then later he like makes a callback to the joke by doing like a really big extravagant one.
Yes, like I wrote some of them down, some of the references, right? So we had Godfather. Yep. I thought of the armor thing as almost like Sailor Moon.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when he like gets the armor on and then Faye's just like
again, another testament to their like artistic ability and how this is so much more than just a Super Nintendo game. The like all the like panning shots and the like spinning shot of all the armor attaching and stuff. I was like, "Oh my god, that's so well done,
so good."
That scene alone would take me 5 years to animate on my own. Like, good god.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was fantastic, and like, I love the cutscenes too. Like, just in general, like they use them sparingly, and they're always like either like super nice artwork or zoomed in pixel art, like the last scene was. But I think that the cinematography for what this game is pretty astounding at times, I would say. Yeah.
Faye and Colin laying under that tree, that was incredible.
Yeah.
Like that, like the, how they really used everything that RPG Maker could do to make that cinematic like that. And he kind of like keeps tilting his head over and they're talking to each other laying on the hill. It's like, oh man, that's so good.
Yeah, and importantly, even in that part, Faye is the one who is encouraging him to basically give up Faye. She's like, "Bro, you gotta do this." She's pushing him to do the hard thing where she's like, "Come on, man. You know why we're here. Just do it. Just say it. Break up with me, you chump."
Pretty much.
Yeah, and that's what was so weird about Faye being like, all of a sudden, I want to mention Faye is scary for a minute when they first realized like all the, like the black eyes
some
and
legit
black mouth
horror stuff going on.
Yeah, I was like, this turned into a horror game for a minute. Yeah.
I was like, what the heck is going on here? I did not come here to get scared right now. It is not October. So, but yeah, I saw that initially. I'm like, geez. But then you realize that isn't what Colin, that isn't the right Faye.
Yeah.
That Faye that they were fighting all through that was more Colin not willing to give up Faye. Like that wasn't what Faye was in Colin's head the entire time. Trying to control him, hold him back.
Yeah.
That was never what Faye was. Faye was always encouraging Colin. Even when it came to Sophia, I thought that maybe Faye would be like, well, you don't need her. Like, you need to like hang out with me. But no, that even then, Colin's like, yeah, I met a girl, and Faye's like, yeah, how's it going? Like, are you gonna pursue that? You know,
Yeah.
like that whole thing. Like, I thought that was awesome.
And then the next scene was like, he's going to do like a concert for the first time, and he's like, I'm just gonna stay out here. You go ahead and do it by yourself. You got this. You know, kind of like, you know, him trying to not have her in the audience or have something to focus on. Like, I'm gonna be here and be present. And of course, that's the first time he sees Sophia do her whole piano thing. And now, so kind of just like really nice symbolism there. And I don't know. I guess like, and then like you're saying at the end with Faye, like she's kind of like the white blood cells, and like the Sigmund characters are like the viruses, and she's trying to get them out pretty much, right?
Yep. Which it's a good symbolization, because at the end of the day, we realize that they really were kind of the bad guys in Colin's story. Mm-hmm. He hired them to be the bad guys, but he had no regrets. And basically you realize that should have never happened. And Faye was doing what she was supposed to do in Colin's head to get them to go away. And then, of course, at the end, he has his last moment with Faye, and then his very last moment with Sophia, and it's perfect.
Yeah,
right.
And I think it's kind of poignant and beautiful that he has that journal still with the invisible writing, where I'm sure, like, knowing he's going to pass away, him sitting there on that balcony where they show him, like, that first old guy memory, where I'm sure he's writing, like, something about his life and things like that, so his wife will know about Faye, too, through that journal, which is really nice.
And that was, you could tell, like, once Colin, I don't even know if he had died at that time. I think he had maybe just flatlined. And Neil walks up to Sophia and takes the book and says, and it isn't shown. Another very good way that Freebird orchestrated a way where you don't need to talk about it. We know exactly what Neil's going to talk to Sophia about, and just has that little side conversation while Ava's doing something that we're actually following, but you can see out of the corner of the screen Neil's having that conversation with Sophia, and you know that he's telling her, like, this is the lemon. You remember the lemon juice? Like, you can find out what he wrote in here, and I think that he would want you to see it.
I mean, we'll never know what is exactly in the book, but it's pretty clear based on the structure that I'm sure he is mentioning Faye and, like, explaining who Faye was to him and stuff. But I also think a lot of it is him just writing about his life with Sophia too, because it was the whole point was that he didn't regret, he didn't have problems with his life with Sophia, that he, he journaled his whole life and wants to share, all those events with her. You mentioned, like, the Sigmund was the bad guys, and in that moment you're right, but one of my favorite parts about the story is that there is no bad guys. Like, no one is wrong.
Yeah,
like,
true.
At different times, people are following the wrong threads and stuff, but everyone is sort of correct in their motivations. Like, when Sigmund is the bad guys, it's because Colin sees that they came to the wrong conclusion. Like, he's like, I didn't know why I brought you guys in here, really, but now that you're, like, sort of landing on this as the decision point, it's like, no, that's definitely not what I want, so I got to stop you from at least doing that, which is why, by the end, they're like, we don't know what he wants, he doesn't know what he wants, so Faye, we're going to let you roll with it, because you're about the only one that can probably give him some perspective on this. And then she does. I also, I loved that they didn't drag it out, the scene where they're on the balcony and she shows up one last time to talk to him. And he's like, so much has happened. And she's like, yeah, I know. I've been there the whole time. I know. So we don't need to, like,
that's great,
break down every single thing that happened in your life. This conversation can be, like, short, sweet, punchy, because it's like, yeah, I know, man. I know. Good life. Enjoy. And I'm like,
I thought it was so, like, we were on that balcony from the very beginning. We walked out there as soon as the doctors arrived to the apartment. We always knew it was there, but then I don't even know if you guys put two and two
not
together.
Until that last scene.
The entire
not
time.
Until that very last scene did I draw that connection. Yeah.
The guy, like the family friend that was selling him.
It's the lakeside apartment. You just got to crane your neck around and look, but maybe not. You'll probably fall to your death, so don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole time they were like, it's fine. But it makes so much sense because Colin, it wasn't the perfect location. It wasn't exactly maybe what they wanted, but I'm sure Colin, actually really liked the fact that it faced another balcony.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that reminded him of his childhood and Faye. Mm-hmm. And I thought that, and then Faye pops up over there and it's like, oh, how did I not put that together my entire playthrough? Like that was so good.
So that was like the closest I had to like a head slap moment where I was like, pay attention, man. This should have been some of the most obvious symbolism in the game. What you didn't suspect anything when there was 2 different balconies in this game? Like there's not a lot going on. You can pay attention to everything.
So things that I saw that did never get an answer, and I don't know what you guys thought of it. It seemed maybe it was just a random coincidence or something from the old game that I didn't ever think of, or something that's coming, but it seemed like the clocks were almost always at 3.
Oh.
And I don't know why that is.
Interesting.
And you say that, and I noticed that now. Like, 3 o'clock. I wonder why.
Like, I think there was one time when it was 4, but every other... I started paying attention. Like, maybe that had something to do with it. Almost every time you looked at a clock, it was 3 o'clock. And I don't know why that is.
Interesting. I did not notice that at all. So that's just one more thread to follow. I'm trying to remember if there's anything from Bird Story that makes that relevant, but I don't remember that level of detail. So interesting.
And then the other weird thing, and maybe this is just like something that happens in other places or something. I don't think so. I made a note and I was like, something with tires. Did you guys notice that on Faye's balcony there were tires? And then almost there were always random tires sitting around at playgrounds. Like, I could see a tire swing, but not just a stack of tires. And I don't know why there were tires. Like, even Asher was, like, playing on a random stack of tires. Like, what kid would you have play on a random stack of tires?
I remember it's like one of the first scenes, maybe the first scene, where they're walking in to the, like, retirement facility or the apartment, and the like duck pond, there's like 2 random tires that were stacked there.
Yeah.
And I said to Lee, I was like, random tires there. And those ones I think later were used as a memory link to jump from something previous to that.
Oh, yeah,
so I was like, maybe the tires are just kind of like a convenient MacGuffin for them to have a way to hop into the scene. But there are also tires in many other scenes where you never, like the ones on Faye's balcony, you never hop to anything over using those. So I was like, I don't know. I never even considered until now. Maybe there's more to that, or maybe they're like symbolizing something that I'm not quite catching.
And then, of course, like the hibiscus flowers they kept mentioning.
Yes.
They're like, why is there a hibiscus flower like randomly right here in the middle of this school and things like that? Like, you know, so yeah.
So the only thing, and I honestly kind of almost came up with this just now talking to you guys. The only thing I can think about for the tires, the clock, the hibiscus, the picture of Bora Bora seems to be in a lot of places, right? Which so the only thing I can think of is that Kangao was just saying, like, this is the way that Colin remembers this stuff. It isn't perfect. It isn't right. But Colin always wanted, like, he just has like a fascination with tires or something. Or whenever we think of a clock, you think of a clock being at a certain, you know, like he just always thinks it's like in his head, the clock is 3 at all times. Like, he doesn't have a perfect memory of what time it actually was. It was just 3. And then the hibiscus thing, I don't think that those hibiscus flowers were actually there. They never were. It's just something that he has a fascination for, and like it's something that's just deeply rooted in his memory. So it just gets strewn out throughout his other memories. That's the only thing I can.
Yeah, he just loves the flower. It's beautiful, right? So maybe it's just something that he just associates with positive memories, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, means a lot to him. So he kind of just like cascades it into his other memories. But
yeah, you're more observant in those regards than I am, for sure. My brain is just like, all right, tell me about the big mysteries. You know, what's Neil up to? What's the, like, his version of the machine that he built ultimately going to be used for? I was surprised that
I do wonder.
One of the big, I think it was the cliffhanger at the end of To the Moon, was Neil taking the pills and you being like, oh snap. Yeah. And in this game, like, you know, that's definitely story relevant, but it's not like a reveal or it doesn't lead to anything. It's just kind of like, oh, he is addicted now. And maybe that will like circle back and make be a key plot point in Imposter Factory, but it was it was interesting to just be like, yeah, that's sort of status quo for him these days. And then the new mystery was something entirely different.
Maybe the next mystery is you go into Neil's mind and he's going to use Faye to like have a better life or something like that.
Did you?
And then that pill popping part's gonna be like part of it, maybe.
True. Yeah. Did you ever play Heavy Rain?
Oh yeah.
No.
I did
not.
In Heavy Rain, there's a detective that uses like AR VR glasses in order to help solve crimes, but he also is like kind of addicted to it. And when he's in that, it messes with his head and he gets like nosebleeds and stuff, and he needs to take pills to counteract that. So it's like the exact same thing in this game where I was like, here's this guy who is like diving into people's memories and always taking pills to help him cope. I was like, I wonder if there's going to be any common themes between those two games.
Maybe it's going to start off with Jason right at the beginning of this.
I personally think that a lot of what Neil is doing with the pills and with the machine that he's making, it's just there's going to be a massive clash between Neil and Ava, because Neil and Ava are close. Like they like pick on each other, right? For certain things, just like you think a lot of relationships start out that way and things like that.
Yeah,
they're very close. They know each other pretty intimately, I would say. They've been around each other for a long time. They've helped each other through a lot of problems. But Neil keeping his potential addiction and the machine away from Ava, I think that's a massive, like, what's going to happen with that? Because I think there's just going to be a revelation where it's like, Neil finds out why he doesn't realize why he never included Ava. Probably because she would have gotten mad at him for it, right? That's why he's not, but that he needs her help to fix something, right? So
yeah,
that's my thought.
And the thing is like Steve was saying earlier, like this information's out there. People have played that game years ago at this point. So I am very interested to see what the finale is all about. And that makes me more excited for the future of Freebird. Also, the studio, it's like they made this awesome thing, but what if they do, what are they going to do next? What's the fresh thing that they're going to do after that? It's like really interesting to me because I love the writing style. So
I wasn't aware that Imposter Factory was the like finale, and that makes sense. It's a trilogy of mainline games and stuff. And my first gut reaction was being bummed out. I'm like, oh no! After how much I loved going back to the Moon and how much I love this game, I don't want this series to end. I'm loving this, right. But it's that doesn't have to necessarily mean anything. They can close the book on these characters, and I'm sure that Khan and that studio have other stories to tell that they'll do very well, because they obviously have a great grasp on like what makes a good, compelling story.
I don't even necessarily think, I could be wrong, but Freebird could stay in the same whatever you want to call it,
like world. The cinematic universe.
They don't have
the Sigmund cinematic universe. Yeah. There you go.
Because they just introduced two new characters that are also doctors that do the exact same thing as Neil and Ava. And I don't know if you guys picked up on when Neil is about to go back in, and I think his name was like Dr. Lin or something like that. Roxy's partner was like, "Hey, we've ran into a situation like this before. Just a word of advice." And then Neil's like, "Oh, you're gonna, whether I want it or not, you're gonna give it to me. So go ahead." And he's like, "Sometimes it's not about the answer; it's about the question." And stuff like that, you could just be like, "Oh, well, this is what they've done, right?" Like, and just follow them the exact same way and learn about them. And you could have Neil and Ava make like little cameos and stuff like that. Like, it's so easy as long as the stories don't get old, which I feel like they just do such a good job at making a story. They could do this. He could do this forever.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah,
without a doubt.
And they're fine releasing on a pretty sparse cadence. So I release a new game every 5 years, and then some supplemental stuff in between. I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Give me a solid 20.
Yeah, take your time. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Give me some more. Other than that, you guys have anything else you want to mention before we close out?
You were going down your list of references, and I think we cut you off, but there's the one that surprised me the most. Not because I was like, whoa, what a crazy reference, because I didn't expect them to reference two things back to back, is they do like the Zelda reference where he hook shots like Jupiter does,
Oh, yeah.
whatever.
The planet.
And then in the middle of the Zelda reference, he makes a Gurren Lagann reference. He says like, my hook shot is the hook shot that will pierce the heavens.
Oh yeah, I didn't even
like,
catch that. I knew I recognized it. I was like, "What's that
that's
from?"
so
But yeah,
ridiculous. It's like, I see you, man.
So my question for both of you is: there's like a power meter that goes up when Neil does the hook shot thing. What did you land on for that power meter? Do you remember?
I was like 3/4 of the way up, I think.
I did it at the very tippy top. I was a super strength
gamer.
Yeah.
So Josh, so was I. Did you pull down Pluto?
Yes.
Yes. The planet changes. I noticed that because I watched a review just to make sure I was saying names and things like that right. I do that sometimes before we come on here. And the reviewer pulled down Neptune.
I pulled down
Neptune?
like Jupiter or Saturn. Yeah. I think it's Jupiter.
Yeah, so it just depends. You're always going to pull a planet. I thought after I pulled down Pluto, I was like, I wonder if I did like the very least powerful one, if I would have just got it up onto the building or something. We would have climbed up that way. But I imagine you like pulled the moon down or Mars
or something
like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just the attention to detail is just it's so crazy.
Good.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So, all in all, I recommend this game. It is good.
Yeah. If anybody's here still that hasn't played it already, I don't know why. It's still worth playing. I don't know why you kept listening, but yeah,
I feel like they'd be lost and be like, "What are they talking about right now?" It sounds so crazy.
I know.
But to me, it's just probably some of my favorite writing in video games are in these two games. So I mean, that's a high mark for me. Being part of IndieQuest, we love it's narrative-driven games that have a really poignant story that just like capture your imagination. Then these just do it. So yeah, not much to say spoilery. I think we covered everything that I want to talk about. But I can't wait to play the third one. Like as soon as I was done playing it yesterday, I was in Discord with you guys. I was like, the third one's the finale? Yes. I want to play it. So pretty excited.
I imagine, we'll let this one settle a little bit, and then sometime in the not immediate but not too distant future, we'll do an Imposter Factory spoiler-sode as well, because we've come too far. Honestly, I'm kind of happy that I played this one now when I do have access to Imposter Factory right away, so I'm not one of those people sweating on a 5-year wait, being like, are you kidding me, man? I need to know what's going on.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question was, Steve, you To the Moon has been one of your favorite indie games for sure. And you kind of mentioned it a lot of times, but yeah, I was just going to ask, like, playing it now, like, are you happy with your decision to wait and things like that? But like, do you wish that you could go back and play it in 2017? If you could get Sigmund to work for you, let me play Finding Paradise in 2017 instead of 2022. What the heck was I doing? That's all I want.
Honestly, I mean, I wouldn't do Sigmund, but I do regret not playing it because I always planned on playing it, and it's just one of those things where, like, I'll get around to it, and I just don't. But
and there's no Fizz-a-dish.
No Fizz-a-dish slows me down. I have a Fizz-a-dish to the moon, but I don't have a Fizz-a-dish to this. But, I tend to make like a kind of big to-do about my Game of the Year list at the end of the year. I have a bunch of fun putting it together. It's like there's some pageantry to it. I enjoy the ceremony. And this is one of those games where it's not on whatever my 2017 list is like fully incomplete, because this game should have been on it, should have been very high on it, and it wasn't represented at all. So I think I would rather go back, play it then, and have it represented there, and then have to suffer the wait for 5 years than what I did now. But there are advantages to the way I did it now. Now I can go in, a couple months and go play the finale.
Yeah, and we had conversations about this game too, like early in IndieQuest, like episode 5 or something. You're like, yeah, I tried to play it. It was in a weird window. I think I'm gonna wait for the Switch version, this and that. And like, you didn't play it, and I was like, okay. And then now here we are. So
Yeah, I was going to wait for the Switch version. Thankfully, the Steam Link solved a lot of those problems. It's funny you mentioned that because I pulled up and there was a save file and it was 7 minutes in. And I was like, oh. I was like, okay.
yeah,
You tried once.
See, it's funny because we started playing this game this time, and I honestly, I've been playing like more actiony games, so I wasn't exactly in the mood to play this game. But I think that really speaks volumes to how well this game is put together. Like sometimes you kind of have to be in a mood to play a game where you're not really playing a game, right? In a lot of ways, you're not in this. You're kind of moving around. But man, once it grabs you, and it's like, no, I am always in the mood to play a game by Freebird.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter.
Yep.
It just sucks you
I
in.
agree.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
So.
Like there was a little time pressure because I was like, I had to kind of schedule out when I could play it to be like, okay, I'm only going to have like these 3 free chunks of time over the next week. So I got to play it in one of those. And actually one of those ended up getting eaten up by other stuff. So I was like, I didn't finish it until yesterday morning and I had plans the whole rest of the day. So I was a little bit crunched, but same thing. All that melted away as soon as you start getting into the story because you're like, oh, this is so good. And we played it in 3 sessions, and I think we set it up perfectly. If you were going to make this like an HBO show or like Lost with like cliffhangers at the end, our first session we played up to right before you get to the vortex in the center, right before you get to that reveal.
Yep.
And then our second playthrough, we stopped right before like all the like Fae combat and stuff, all like the like last 45 minutes that are just like boom 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 boom. So
Right.
we left ourselves 2 good cliffhangers, which was nice.
Well, Josh smoked the whole pack in one day. I'm kind of
That's
of that.
that's another way to
chance
go, and I
do
respect it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I played maybe like 45 minutes to an hour, and then I was like, well, Saturday we don't have no plans really. I'm just gonna sit down. I'll beat this throughout the day. Like I said, I just sat there and just plowed through it and just loved it. So I like the fresh feeling. Like I just played this thing. There's so many things just fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best way to play something like this and then talk about it. Because like 2 weeks from now, I'd be like, wait, what happened with what? Like it wouldn't be as fresh in my mind. So it was nice to have that. I just played this game. Let's talk about it right now. Feeling with the spoiler talk.
That's one of my favorite things about doing these kinds of episodes. It has that energy of just got out of the theaters watching a movie with your friends and you're all standing outside the movie theater like decompressing and breaking down and talking through what you just watched. Same vibe, and that's what I like.
And these games lend themselves so well. Like I'm sure we all had a fairly like within a half an hour was our different play times. But this game is the kind of game that you're going to beat in 5 to 6 hours no matter what you do, right? Like that's going to be the time, unless you're just sitting there on the pause screen staring. But otherwise, like if you're playing through it at a decent clip, you're going to beat it in that amount of time. So it's nice that we can just agree on it and be like, all right, I need 5 hours and I should be good. I'll finish it. So yeah, it's pretty neat.
Excellent.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to say, or else we'll say bye until the next episode, I think.
No.
Right?
Yeah. Thanks for chatting, brothers.
Yeah. Thanks for playing it alongside me. And dear listener, I hope you also enjoy this game.
Yeah. I really hope some people play this and like, wow, thanks IndieQuest for, recommending this game for us or making an episode about it, because, I think these kind of go under the radar, these games. So hopefully people are discovering these fantastic games like we love them. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the sequel. Like we were saying, we'll do the sequel eventually down the line. But until the next episode, I guess we're done. Thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
See you guys.
I never stood up very tall. I think my voice was fairly small. But there were times I'd want to shout, though my thoughts weren't sorted out. So I'd stumble and I'd fall. because trading my yesterday is to wish my life away. As we dream and as we grow, we have to learn to let things go. But let the wonder never fade, though we've turned 10,000 pages, flying high or stuck below. I've searched for meaning amidst doubt. I finally figured that part out. And all the stories inside me feels like I'm bursting at the seams. And you're here after all the grass on the other side. Is it only greener in my mind? I'd still want it the same, because trading my yesterday is to wish my life away.